Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's From Theory to Practice, where I take a look at the research so you don't have to. Now, for those of you who are regulars to this channel, you'll notice I kind of don't put out a lot of videos anymore. And the reason for that is it just takes so much time to make the animations and the images that I've got a young family and I'm just not finding the time to do it. So this year, I've decided to try a brand new format. This new format, much uglier, less sexy, but it's so much faster, and it's going to mean I can take a look at more papers and get more information out to you. So the paper I've selected today is called Why Do Teachers Matter? A meta-analytic review of how teacher characteristics and competencies affect student academic achievement by Lopez Martin and colleagues. Now, why did I select this particular paper? For this reason here. Why do teachers matter? Now, when I first read that question, I thought that was absolutely silly. Asking why teachers matter for learning is akin to asking why does water matter for swimming. I just thought it was basically obvious and self-evident. But then I thought a little bit deeper, and I think I know where these researchers were going. They were hinting at this: robots, AI. There's a lot of talk right now about AI taking over as teachers. And I think this paper was taking a look at the question, do human characteristics matter for learning? And if the answer is no, then maybe this whole robot thing kind of makes sense. Now, when we talk about teachers, typically when it comes to research, we talk largely about pedagogy. What do teachers do? Here's what good teachers do. Here's what bad teachers do. And this is where the tech can kind of slip in. Tech can do pedagogy. So, for example, one of the things we've seen in the past is this concept of one-to-one tutoring. Now, you may have heard of this concept. It's called the 2 sigma problem. And now, if you haven't heard that term, here's basically what this means. Way back in the day, in the 80s, Benjamin Bloom of Bloom's taxonomy fame put out a paper where he said the impact of one-to-one tutoring, having one teacher, one student, has 2.0 effect size impact on learning, which is as high as you're ever going to get. So he came out and said the gold standard to all learning and teaching is going to be one-on-one tutoring. Everything else we do in school is going to have to live up to that benchmark. Now, to be fair, Bloom, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but he was completely wrong. In the last about 4 decades, we've got a lot more data that shows one-to-one tutoring doesn't have a 2.0 effect size. It's closer to 0.24, an order of magnitude lower. But that's still pretty dang good. And this is where people like Saul Khan can come in and say, well, we can do one-to-one tutoring. Let us bring AI computers into your classroom. But then you can dig a little bit deeper and you can say, what is it about one-to-one tutoring that actually works? Is it the pedagogy or is it something else? And when you start looking at what we call moderators, what you'll see is the biggest influence of does tutoring work is this: the student-tutor relationship. The relationship seems to be the key driver of whether or not one-to-one tutoring is going to work. And specifically, the aspect of the relationship is empathy. If you have an empathetic relationship with your tutor, you're likely to learn from them. If you don't, you're likely not to. Now, if we look at just purely empathy, that has an effect size on learning of 0.62, 2.5 times greater than if we just look at one-to-one tutoring. So at the end of the day, believe it or not, if you have a choice between having a tutor who's going to give you the right pedagogy at the right moment or a tutor that you like, you will learn more from the tutor you like than the perfect computerized pedagogist. Now, this leads to the question, what is empathy? Is that something computers can emulate? And just to be simple, we could spend an hour on this. Empathy basically requires 2 things: oxytocin and a brain. When 2 people release a chemical called oxytocin, their biology starts to synchronize. That is empathy. Empathy, by its definition, requires 2 people. It is transpersonal. What is something a computer absolutely doesn't have and will never have? Oxytocin, and a brain. So this is an example of teachers must matter because there are human aspects beyond just pedagogy that impact learning sometimes just as strongly as pedagogy. So that's where this paper came in. These researchers said, what are some of the other characteristics of humans that might drive learning? So these researchers did a meta-analysis. So for this particular meta-analysis, they looked at 40 different papers that explored 1.5 million secondary students. So we're only talking about secondary students here, and 7,000 secondary teachers. These teachers and students came from 17 different countries, and they were able to pull out 21 different human characteristic measures to see, do any of these things matter for learning? And what did they find? Well, all up, the big finding they got was, drumroll please, teachers matter. Hooray! What a surprising finding. Said absolutely no one who's ever had a teacher from the past who has highly influenced their life today, be that for good or for bad. So of course teachers matter, but now we can say what specific aspects might be more important than others. I thought personality. would be the big kind of moderator here. Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Are you funny? Are you not? But it turns out when they look at general personality measures, that really only impacted about 5.5% of variation of performance among students. So it's not really personality per se that seems to matter. But remember, they had 21 measures. So of those other 20 measures, what seems to matter more? Well, rather than looking at all 20 measures, I've just picked out 5 that I think are representative of everything else. So here are the 5 I've selected to look at. Self-efficacy, which basically says, do you believe you can accomplish the act of teaching? How much belief do you have in yourself? Professional development, how much do you engage in professional growth and learning? Subject knowledge, how much do you know about the topic you're teaching? Learning beliefs, do you believe students can learn? So almost that kind of mindset question. And reflective attitude, are you willing to look at, question, and adapt your own practices when needed? So let's play a quick game. Of these 5 aspects, how would you rank them? Which do you think is kind of least impactful on learning, and which do you think is kind of most impactful on student learning? Well, what do we got? At the bottom of the ladder, we have learning beliefs, which impact about 6% of variation of student performance, which is kind of surprising until you realize learning beliefs is kind of binary. It's a weird measure. You believe kids can learn or you don't. There's no real scale. It's on or off. And you can assume the vast majority of teachers will believe kids can learn. That's why we became teachers. So that's most likely why this has such a low impact, because there's so little variation amongst teachers, this kind of gets lost in the wash. Next on the ladder is subject knowledge, which influences about 11% of variation of student performance. Next, we have self-efficacy, belief in your own abilities, 14%. Professional development, do you engage with growth and learning, 16%. And at the top, reflective attitude impacts about 26% of variation of student performance. And when you look at it, this actually tells a pretty coherent and compelling story. Learning beliefs, we all come into the classroom thinking, yeah, kids can learn. The more we teach, the more we develop knowledge of our subject. What do I have to teach? What do I not? What's important? What's not important? Over a couple of years, we start to believe more and more and more in ourselves. I'm pretty good at this. I'm getting great at this. Our impact increases. Sooner or later, at about the 3 to 5 year mark, we hit that plateau, and now we start growing. We say, I know what I can do. What more is there out there? And of those people who engage with new ideas, the ones willing to consider, not always take on board, but think, does this matter for me? Can I adapt for this? Is this meaningful? Is this not? Those willing to reflect upon and adapt their teaching start to do even better. But again, all of this pales in comparison to empathetic relationship, which impacts about 38% of student variation. So now then, what does this all mean for us as teachers? Let's bring this back. What does this mean for us? Well, top thing is, congratulations, we do matter. Computers can teach, sure, but having a computer that gives you the right pedagogy, the right idea at just the right moment will typically pale in comparison to a human being who can give you those same 3 things with all these additional characteristics. And I think the most important aspect of this work is we've kind of got 2 different characteristics. I'm going to call them physical versus psychological. Physical characteristics are things like age, sex, race, and psychological characteristics are things like reflective attitude, self-efficacy. What's interesting about this research is all those physical aspects, things like age, had much lower impact on learning than those psychological aspects. And why is that important? Because physical and psychological, you can typically think of them, not perfectly, but as fixed and malleable. There's not much we can do about our age, but there is stuff we can do about our attitude. Luckily, these kind of fixed characteristics are bottom of the ladder, and it's these malleable, these things we can literally change and develop and grow within ourselves that have the most impact on learning. And last but not least is this idea here. The biggest moderators of student learning seem to be whether or not the teacher, him or herself, was willing to learn and reflect. Were we willing to continue to be students of education while being practitioners of education? Now, importantly, this willingness to reflect doesn't mean you just take everything on board. Something new comes down the pipe, you plug it into your classroom. Here's an idea, yeah, let's do it. It's deep reflection. When new ideas come, you don't automatically take them on board. You think, is this going to be helpful? Is this not? Where am I at in my trajectory? What do I need? And with this reflection, we end up rejecting a lot more new ideas than we accept. But the ones we accept, we do for a reason. We do with purpose. It's change intentional, not change just because the world is changing. Change because we genuinely understand our own practice and thinking, and we understand what we need and desire to push it to the next level. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope that was fun and you got an idea or two to play with. And I hope this new format didn't just totally screw things up. If you want to keep up on new ideas and new things we're doing, please take a look at our website. It's www.lmeglobal.net, or take a look at our award-winning science of learning programs for teachers and students called the Learning Blueprint. A lot of good ideas in there as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.